Welcome to Fireside Giants, a featured podcast by Empire Sports Media. I'm your host, Alexander Wilson, and my co-host, Anthony Rivardo, is joining me for our very first episode. Welcome, Anthony. I'm really excited to get this going in 2020. It's been a little while since we had our last Keeping Up with the G-Men podcast, but I'm really excited to be, back in the game and, starting this off on the offseason where we can kind of gather our thoughts and go about this appropriately and kind of break everything down as we go. And, being that it's the dead of winter, the best time to kind of dive into the free agency prospects and those young guys in college that are coming into the NFL and who kind of makes sense for the Giants. But just to start, I want to start off with the Super Bowl and just talk about that a little bit and what your thoughts were on Patrick Mahomes winning the MVP and just kind of everything that went down leading up to the game and the final score, and just if you thought it was exciting.
Yeah, for sure. Super excited to start Fireside Giants, and I thought it was a great Super Bowl last night. I was rooting for the Chiefs, so I'm happy that Patrick Mahomes got that win, and Andy Reid too. That man really deserved it. And I'd say I probably think Damian Williams deserved the MVP, but I understand why Mahomes got it. He is the quarterback. He's the most valuable player on the field, and he did play a good game. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to get them the win, and he made some key throws in the fourth quarter that basically won them the game. So I'm not upset that he won MVP. I'm happy for him. I just think Damian Williams, he played a hell of a game too, and he probably deserved it just a little more than Mahomes did.
I agree. Looking at Mahomes in the first half, he had 2 interceptions. He did not look like the quarterback we know him to be. And Damian Williams was amazing. He had 104 rushing yards, a touchdown on the ground, 29 receiving yards, and a touchdown through the air. And you could make a pretty good argument to say that he should have been the MVP. And he was kind of overlooked in the entirety of the post game. Like, nobody talked about him. Fred Clark was up there. Mahomes was up there, telling everyone to go to Disney World, as he said in 2013 via Twitter. He was like, one day I'm going to be there. I'm going to say we're going to Disney World. And it was really cool to see him do that, be the MVP at 24 years old. I'm 23, and now I feel like I've done absolutely nothing with my life. So there you go. It's like, you have to respect his grind and what he's done so far, especially when you sound like Kermit the Frog. It's really hard to get ahead in life. So I actually really liked, his second half comeback and everything that he put together in the Super Bowl. But like you said, Damian Williams had the better performance, which kind of is what the MVP is. So he should have won it. But, for the NFL's sake, they're trying to make Mahomes the master of the NFL and make him the image, the guy that everyone thinks of when you're looking at, the NFL and the best teams in the league, because they could be the next New England Patriots for all we know. But there was a lot of good players in the game in general, and a few of them are going to be free agents. I know one of them is Chris Jones. On the defensive side for the Chiefs, he had a fantastic game. Some could even argue that he could have won the MVP too with all the pressures he had on Jimmy Garoppolo. Last season he finished with 9 sacks and 20 quarterback hits. So he could be someone the Giants could look into. I think he'll re-sign with the Chiefs, knowing the system. Just winning a Super Bowl, it would be foolish for them not to bring someone like that back, someone that they can rely on and trust and who showed up in a big game. So I think that the Giants would be smart to look at him, but I don't think he's going to go. Who's on your mind for the free agency, and is there someone on the Chiefs side or a free agent from the Super Bowl that you were looking at?
Well, I don't think Chris Jones is necessarily someone the Giants should go after, just because we've got a lot invested into the defensive line already, and we're probably going to pay Leonard Williams a pretty heavy sum this offseason. So,
oh, please no.
Yeah, well, Chris Jones, I can't imagine that he leaves Kansas City. All the Chiefs players, they just love it there. And also, before I discuss any free agents that I'm looking at, got to give a shout out to our man, Steve Spagnuolo.
Yes.
He pulled through again in the Super Bowl, got himself a ring. I was rooting for him when it was the fourth quarter and the 49ers are getting the ball back. I was telling my family, I was like, it's over. Spagnuolo's got this in the bag. And I was right.
You were right.
So, yeah.
And you're 100% right. And Steve Spagnuolo is one of those interesting coaches that, he won a Super Bowl with the Giants, and then suddenly he was terrible. Like, the Giants defense just crumbled, and they had, terrible rankings. It was just really interesting to see him go from such a high point to a low point, and then he was the interim head coach for a few weeks. Was it the end of Coughlin era, or was it?
I believe it was the end of Spagnuolo era. McAdoo era. And yeah, Spagnuolo was with us for Super Bowl 42. And then he
Yeah.
was a head coach for the Rams for a while. He
Yep.
left, and he didn't have a whole lot of success, but he finally came back to us that 2016 season with McAdoo. And yeah, it wasn't so successful as interim head coach, but he did have some. He did put together a good postseason run for us, almost
That's
with
true. That's true.
2016.
If
Yeah, I
only
mean
the
he's a
boat.
great coach. Yeah, if only Odell didn't decide to go party on a boat with Justin Bieber right before a game. Anyway, looking at free agents, I'm really not sure what Chiefs players, 49ers players are available. Um, I know in free agency, though, I'm looking at some edge rushers, Yannick Ngakoue. That's obviously the name that all Giants fans are looking after, and that's really who they should go after. I mean, that's a game-changing player. I'm just a little worried you might end up overpaying him, and then he doesn't meet the expectations of fans, and it's like Olivier Vernon 2.0. But
Hmm.
you just got to be realistic with what you're paying for and know that you're not getting like a game-breaking defensive end there. You're just getting like someone who's consistently good, and we don't have that. It's like
Right.
Lorenzo Carter or Shane Zimenez. They're not consistently going to be getting pressure, but Yannick Ngakoue will, even if he's not getting 10 sacks a year. At least he's getting close to it, and you just got to temper your expectations, really. And there's also some other big names that I doubt the Giants are going to land, but I'm hoping Byron Jones. I wouldn't mind Amari Cooper. You know, it's a really loaded free agency class. We got $69 million to spend, so it should be a really fun offseason.
I agree. And I think that aside from free agency, the draft capital that we have is also something to consider, especially with the depth in this draft. There's so many tackle options, so many wide receivers. And that's kind of why I'm leaning towards Isaiah Simmons in the draft. Obviously, Chase Young probably won't be there at the number 4 pick, which leaves us with the choice of taking a guy like Simmons or trading back. This would be the perfect time for Gettleman to trade back and accumulate some more capital to spend, especially with a lot of really good tackle options. And like that's kind of where my head's at in this scenario. But in the free agent, pass rushing market, Ngakoue makes sense to me. I just don't think he deserves the kind of money that he's going to get. And the Giants are going to have to overpay. There are other teams out there that are better and in a better position to win. And I think that the Giants are going to have to overpay significantly to actually draw those players in. So I should expect them, and everyone should be anticipating a bunch of cuts that we may not expect. We know, Rhett Allison's probably going to go, Alec Ogletree's probably going to go, Antoine Bethea is going to go. There's a bunch of guys that are going to be released, and they're going to save a ton of cap. So I'm thinking that we will land in the 80 to 90 million range. But Gettleman also said you need to go into the regular season with about 20 million left over. So that really only leaves us with about $60 million to spend. So the draft is really where I'm looking to go after a guy like Simmons, who can play multiple positions, and especially with Patrick Graham, he's coming in. He's going to introduce a hybrid system. I don't anticipate, them playing a specific 3-4 or 4-3 defense. It's going to be a mixture of different looks, and that's why I don't think they should pay Leonard Williams. By the way, because if you have Dalvin Tomlinson and Dexter Lawrence in a hybrid defense, you don't need a guy that's going to play 50, 40% of snaps, paying him $15 million a year. It doesn't make sense to me. And if you get a guy like Simmons and Ryan Connolly coming back, the run defense should improve, right? Like that's what I'm thinking. But I really like what Simmons brings to the table in terms of versatility and his dynamic style of play. He played a lot of linebacker, safety, and even cornerback. And we saw that in the national championship game. He played a lot of different positions, and I think that bringing a guy like that into the defense will give the Giants a really good opportunity to make the most of that hybrid system that Patrick Graham is going to bring to the team, and the fundamentalistic approach that Simmons has. They're going to focus on grinding out those interesting things that he brings to the table, and utilizing them to their advantage. And they haven't had a good linebacker in so long. You know.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I had a good linebacker, and you mentioned the draft capital, and we really don't have much draft capital. And for the Leonard Williams trade, we gave up that third round pick, and it's going to come back to bite us because, like you said, there's a lot of depth in this draft class, whether it be at receiver, even offensive tackle, which is so rare that there's depth at offensive tackle, but there actually is this year. There's at least four talents that could go in the first round, and that third round pick not being there is really going to come back to bite us. So I gotta imagine the Giants are going to be looking to make some trades to recoup that third round pick.
Hmm.
I don't know if they're gonna, they should move on from Ogletree, try and get a trade for him. And honestly, if it comes down to it, you might even want to consider letting one of those receivers go, whether that be Sterling Shepard or Golden Tate, because this is a great draft class. You can replace them easily in free agency or the draft. And while I don't really want them to trade Sterling Shepard, I wouldn't complain completely if they got a second or third round pick out of it because, we've got so many holes all over this team. I think Isaiah Simmons would be an excellent pick at number 4. But he's got some bust potential. We've seen a lot of these players before where they play like 5 different positions in college. That transition to the NFL is never easy.
Mhm.
Jabril Peppers is one of them, and I like Peppers, but he's not a game-breaking player, and he played everywhere in college, but he just hasn't shown that type of versatility in the NFL yet. And I just hope Simmons isn't like that. I don't think he is because I think he's a lot bigger and he's a lot better in college. But you know, when you look at offensive tackles, you might consider taking one in the first round. I just think trading down is the best way to go, so that you can recoup that draft capital, get a new third round pick, maybe get a second first round pick from one of these quarterback needy teams. Like I don't know if the Jaguars decide to trade up, I doubt it, but the Dolphins for sure. Um, I think you move back a few spots, and if Simmons is still there, then you take him. If not, you get the best offensive tackle, and then you hopefully gain more picks, and you can go edge rusher in round 2 or something. But I'm still holding out hope that we're going to get Chase Young. Number 1 pick is going to be Joe Burrow. Number 2 pick is going to be Tua, and number 3 pick is going to be Justin Herbert, and then we're going to end up with Chase Young. So
That
that's
would be
what.
perfect. In an ideal world, that's exactly what would happen. And I just tweeted out before. If you don't follow me on Twitter, it's Alex Wilson ESM. And I just tweeted out before, like, what do you think if Chase Young's and Simmons is on the board? Who are you taking? And obviously, a majority of people said Chase Young just based on his pass rush potential. This guy is a generational talent in terms of physicality and athleticism. But Simmons has that playmaking ability that is not, like you said, he has bust potential. But the reality is that he's one of those players that can do it all. He's kind of like Jabril Peppers, and everyone says the Giants lack playmakers. And if you have Jabril Peppers, who I often forget about because he missed the last few weeks of the year, and he's a really talented player, and he looked pretty good with the Giants last year. I only think he's going to improve. And inserting a guy like Simmons into that defense where he can move around just like Jabril Peppers and in a hybrid scheme, they can do so many things together in terms of rushing the passer, dropping back in coverage. It's going to cause hell for opposing quarterbacks to try and decipher what they're going to do. On the other hand, you have Chase Young, who's going to dominate consistently. And if you have a guy like Marcus Golden, Dexter Lawrence, and Dalvin Tomlinson on the inside, there is no way you can physically stop all of those players. Like you just can't do it. And then you have a guy, like Ryan Connolly in the middle who can rush the passer. He had a sack in 4 games and 2 interceptions. And I'm really excited for him to return too. And they have to find another linebacker who can fit the mold. I think someone like Corey Littleton from the Los Angeles Rams is a good option. He's a good tackler, a good run stopper. So I think there's a lot of different things they can do. But like you said, recouping some of that draft capital, that they lost in the Leonard Williams trade. If they re-sign him, they lose that 3rd round pick. But if they let him go, they recoup a 3rd round compensatory pick, I believe, in the lower, actually it's the higher portion of the 3rd round. So I think they had a low 3rd round pick, and then they would land in the 95 range if
Hmm.
they recoup the compensatory pick, which is a big difference if you think about it. Like the difference of quality in a player you can get in the top of the
It's
3rd and the
huge.
bottom of the 3rd is huge. And like that's where my biggest question mark for Gettleman is he essentially traded like what could have been a quality player for a rental. And I get the premise behind it. They wanted to see what, Williams had in terms of quality and if he's worth a long-term investment. He did help the run stopping game a decent amount, but in my opinion, if that's all you're going to do, that's not worthy of 15, even $13 million per season. He wants to be paid like one of the best interior defensive tackles in the league. Personally, I think they should just go back to a 4-3, screw the 3 defensive tackle situation. I don't like that 3-4 system because it relies way too much on interior linemen. And I like pass rushers. I like, everyone knows if you have 3 interior defensive linemen, they're going to be rushing the passer on passing downs, and on running downs, they're going to be trying to plug the holes. But if you have 2, defensive ends and 2 interior tackles, you can do so many different things with stunts, and I just think it's a lot better. I liked, the Tom Coughlin arrow, and Steve Spagnuolo was using that that 4-3 scheme with Justin Tuck, Osi Umenyiora. I loved it. That's personally what I refer to every time I think of quality defensive lines. So I think that they need to return back to that system. And why I think the hybrid will give him a little bit of leniency in that respect, and why I don't think Leonard Williams is going to be re-signing with the Giants.
Well, 3-4 versus 4-3. I totally hear you there with when Steve Spagnuolo's old school NASCAR package where he put all just pass rushers out
Yes,
there. Yeah, I mean that was
exactly.
awesome. But when you listen to Patrick Graham talk about his defense, he's like as multiple as it gets. He said, sure, it might be a base 3-4, but some games we'll play with 6 defensive linemen or 5 defensive linemen. Some games we might play with 2. It really doesn't matter to him. It's not about a system. It's about week to week who's the opponent and how do we get the most out of our players. And that's my favorite part about Joe Judge's introductory press conference when he said he's not trying to fit square pegs into round holes. He's going to look at these players as athletes and see where
Hmm.
they fit best. He's not just going to look at them as a position. That was music to my ears because we would always see just the garbage that we dealt with Shermer and McAdoo, where they would just plug players into their scheme rather
Yep.
than building the scheme around their players. You look at the best teams in the league. You look at the Chiefs. You look at the Seahawks is a perfect example with DK Metcalf. Everybody coming out of the draft was talking about DK Metcalf, saying he's limited. He can't turn because he had a bad 3 cone time and shuttle time or whatever, and all he's going to be able to do is run go routes. And the Seahawks said, okay, if that's all he's going to be able to do, then that's all we're going to make him do because
Hmm.
he's really, really good at it. And now DK Metcalf had an awesome rookie season because they know how to use him. They fit the player. They built the scheme around the player rather than the other way around. And that's what I'm really excited for with the Giants this upcoming season because I know that's what we're going to be doing now. And I think when you look at Isaiah Simmons, that's a perfect fit there. I mean, that's the player that you build the scheme around, and this is what I'm excited for. I don't think that 3-4 versus 4-3 really matters. Um, I just think it's more about the game plan and how you use these players, really. And if they're going to use Leonard Williams as primary run defender, or if they're going to try and make a pass rush, if you're just going to use him as a run defender, he's not worth paying. But I don't think they will because he can generate pressure. He doesn't really get the sacks, but he gets some pressure. And I think if the team knows how to use him, then they'll get him in the backfield often, and it won't just be rotating him in on running downs. And
Right.
so I think there is value with Leonard Williams, though I don't think it's necessarily worth the contract, like you said.
Right. And I think they really gave up on BJ Hill way too soon. They kind of just were like, screw BJ Hill. We're going to get Leonard Williams and insert him right into the system. Hill had a really good rookie year. People forget. And just because he didn't perform that well last year and until, leading up to the trade for Williams doesn't mean he can't be a good player. I think that's something that we need to consider or the Giants will definitely be looking at. And like you said, what I love about Joe Judge is his attention to detail and the fact that he's going to be going in there and evaluating every single player for their maximum, ability. Like they are going to be able to play multiple different positions. If he wants his star wide receiver returning punts, if he wants, his star linebacker as a gunner, they're going to be able to do it if someone's injured. That's the whole point of like the team mentality and just wanting to be the most you can be for your team. Like that's what he brings to this. And I think that's really special. Like that's something like he loves football. And like who was it the other day? Gronk, who was like, he's crazy. Like Joe Judge is crazy.
Hmm.
He loves football more than anyone I've ever seen. And like, for a player on the Patriots to say that about somebody, I think that that's, special, especially with Gronk being such a special player when he was healthy. I think Joe Judge, like a lot of times, the Patriots coaches leave the organization, they don't end up succeeding. I think that this might be an exception. Joe Judge just has that gift, and he's learned under some of the best coaches out there, and he's brought in a really good coaching staff. It's very underrated when you think about it. A lot of these guys, like Jerry Shuplinski, this guy, nobody knows who he is. I just wrote an article about him the other day. Nobody knows who he is, and he helped develop Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Brissett, and essentially learned from Tom Brady and his fundamentalistic approach. Like all of these things combined, like being thrust onto Daniel Jones with Jason Garrett coming in and helping Daniel Jones after his time with Tony Romo and Dak Prescott. Daniel Jones couldn't be like he's like in a nursery care right now. He's in an incubator. Like they're just letting him grow. And I think that like what they're doing right now is exactly what they should be doing. It's a beautiful sight to see them, like you said, focusing on a player and building around them. That's what they just did with Daniel Jones and the coaching staff. They said, okay, we want to build around Daniel Jones. We're going to give him the exact resources and everything he needs to learn to the best of his ability. And Jones is gonna thrive in this offense because I think Jason Garrett's gonna probably bring in a big wide receiver like a Des Bryant type of size guy to be that big red zone threat, or they'll just use Evan Ingram in that way. But they're also going to rely on Saquon Barkley a lot, and I think that takes a lot of pressure off of Daniel Jones. And that offensive line obviously needs to be upgraded. We're going to see a lot of action going on there. I think if they don't allocate that money towards Leonard Williams, it needs to go towards the right tackle position. If they don't even move Nate Solder, they can move him over to right tackle and sign someone to play left tackle or draft somebody. And there's a bunch of guys in free agency. Anthony Costanzo is one of them. Jack Conklin to play right tackle. There's a bunch of guys. But I'm really excited to see where they go with this offseason and like what they prioritize, because the offensive line needs to be, the big one. Like Mark Colombo coming in from Dallas. They know what it takes to have a good offensive line, and they know what players to look for. They're setting Daniel Jones up, like I said, with care. They're guiding him. It's going to be amazing to see his development. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I'm super stoked for that. And like you said, Jerry Shaplinski, I thought that was an excellent hiring. I really think the Giants crushed it with their coaching staff this time around. I know it's like a weird thing. Like a lot of people usually don't pay attention to all the coaching hires, but back in 2017 when we hired Pat Shermer, I remember specifically reading that they hired Hal Hunter, and I said, why in the world did they hire Hal Hunter? I mean, the man, when he was with the Browns in 2016, the Browns gave up 66 sacks, and that's who we hired to be our offensive line coach when we've just had the worst offensive line for years. And I expect things to be much different now. I think you saw all the time this offensive line not picking up stunts, sliding the wrong way in pass protection. And I think that's really just poor coaching. They were never on the same page. They were always making mistakes. But I think now with Mark Colombo and Jason Garrett, we should see a major improvement in the offensive line with the talent we already have there. And I do expect them to invest heavily this offseason and add a lot more talent into the offensive line. And I think obviously the offensive line, it's something that Eli rarely ever had, was a good offensive line in front of him.
Yep.
But hopefully we can get one in front of Daniel now so that he has one for the long haul, and it'll help his progression tremendously.
Absolutely. I think you hit it on the head. Just his development is the priority here. They need to be focusing on that, and it seems like they have, especially Joe Judge. Like people overlook Joe Judge's development. He's never been a head coach before. They brought in Freddie Kitchens and Jason Garrett. Both of them have experience in that field, in that position, and I think it's going to help him tremendously, along with Daniel Jones. Just having so much experience around them, it can only be good. Pat Shermer came in, and when he came in originally, what they always say in the opening press conferences is really exciting and optimistic and promising, but it's the action that counts. And I think the actions that they've taken so far in piecing together this coaching staff has said a lot about what they want to do and the experience they want to have on the staff. So that to me is special. Even if you don't know the names, don't be scared if you don't recognize these names, because some of them are really, really talented coaches that have spent time with Judge, have spent time under some of the best coaches, like you said before, Jerry Shuplinski. Spent time under Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, Jacoby Brissett, Jimmy Garoppolo. You can't get much better than some of these players and coaches, and nobody knew who he was. So the fact that he came over to the Giants, don't write these people off. They have tons of credibility. And we're going to be diving into plenty more as the offseason continues. We're just getting started. We're going to do a little quick one today. So it's only 30 minutes, but we're going to keep, giving you guys more content, hopefully get some really cool people on the podcast. But I really hope you enjoyed the first episode of Fireside Giants. We have plenty more on the way, and I hope you have a great afternoon.